Are we live? Are we live now? Okay.
We are.
We are live. Okay. Welcome everyone to the first gubernatorial Google Hangout. I am very fortunate to be moderating this on behalf of Jeff McCormick and his great campaign. My name is Tammy Kahn-Fennell. I'm the CEO of a company called Market Me Sweet. We're a tech startup, and we have a social media marketing and engagement platform that helps small businesses, organizations, political campaigns help manage and prioritize and find relevant conversations on social media. So I'm really thrilled to be able to help broadcast this first kind of social media outreach with you, Jeff. So just to kind of set a format for this is our first one. So if everyone can bear with us, we're doing our very best to make this go as seamless as possible, but we all know technology sometimes plays some tricks on us. So we have some awesome, we're going to call them panelists. So the way we did this, we asked people to ask questions, and then people who are willing to come on and ask Jeff questions with a camera to their face are here to ask questions. And we also have a stack of questions that have come in through social media. If anyone who is watching the stream wants to ask questions live, please tweet us at jmac4gov and use the hashtag Jeff4Jobs, so that's the number 4, Jeff4Jobs, and we'll do our best to answer your question, and we'll definitely be doing more of these, so if we don't get it, we'll still make sure your question gets answered one way or another. So, Jeff, we're going to be putting you to work for the next hour to 45 minutes to an hour. I hope you don't mind that.
I look forward to it.
So I thought to kick it off, Jeff, this was your idea. You came to me and you said you really wanted to start connecting with people in more of an uncommon way. So I'm going to let you kind of kick this off, and then we'll jump right into our panelists.
Well, the spirit of this is something that I'd actually like to bring to the corner office. You know, as someone who works building technology companies for the last 10 decades of my life, I have a healthy respect for what we can do. And if you think about not only the transparency, but the open line of communication that we could have going forward, and I'm not just talking about a campaign here, I'm really talking more about a style of governance, because I'm a firm believer that the best solutions come from the world. They come from asking questions and listening to people. So I actually don't like the one-directional or the monotone, voice that you kind of get out there. I like it to be a dialogue. So that's the overarching kind of rationale for this. And I'm thrilled to be here, Tammy. Thank you for taking your time, and to all the panelists and to the people out there listening and asking questions and giving us ideas as well.
Great. Okay, and just to kick off, and panelists, I should have said this at the forefront. If you're not talking, can we just all mute our mics? If you're not talking, it'll make it so there's less background noise. And then as soon as you're ready to talk, or if you want to interact, just simply unmute your mic. Sound good? Okay. Excellent. Jeff, don't mute your mic because you're on the hot seat now. So we're going to start right by jumping in with somebody who's joining us. So Louis, if you could unmute your mic. Louis is joining us from Longmeadow, Massachusetts. And Louis, I think you're a student right now, if I understand correctly, and you had a question or two for Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. So I am currently a student at Westfield State University. I just graduated from Holyoke Community College with an Associate's in Arts and Liberal Arts. And the rise in tuition has been a problem for many of my fellow students, and sometimes myself as well, with the cost of books and the cost of tuition. And I was wondering what you would do as governor to combat these high prices.
Well, there are several answers to that and ways to attack this problem. We have to look at it more than just come up with more and more and more money to finance, especially higher education. We have to start doing more with less, essentially, doing more with technology. We have companies that do that. We're used in hundreds of colleges and universities. We also do that for the grade school level with a math teaching software company. So technology does play a role here. The other thing, Louis, that I think is very important is that we work with businesses to understand the jobs that are going to be out there and essentially create programs where we can help kids, and this is perhaps students that are younger than you, but help people think through getting a high school diploma, vocational training, community colleges, four-year degrees, and how to thread all of that together so that at the end of the day, there is a very, very high likelihood that people have jobs waiting for them. And then the last piece is the overall financing piece that I think is very important. As I sit here at Work Bar in Central Square, obviously a lot of, this is in Cambridge, a lot of technology companies, they want to have talent around them. A lot of companies around here are built on strong people like you, and this is true throughout the Commonwealth. So to have people who are really trained and can kind of hit the ground running is extremely important to them. And I'm working on putting together a program where we can take essentially a sponsorship from an employer combined with the normal financial aid, combined with the philanthropic resources that are out there, because there are people that want to support these kinds of programs, but they want to see the metrics. They want it to be almost venture philanthropy, if you will, something that is a lasting solution. And then have the state look at perhaps some very low interest loans with a long-term payback to make it as affordable for everyone. And the combination of all that could be an extremely powerful tool. But again, getting back to the first point, part of it is just about using technology more efficiently so that we can avail the system to more people without this, significant increases year after year after year. Because I recognize the burden.
Okay. I think Tammy is muted, trying to talk.
I was trying to follow my own rules and mute myself, and I forgot to unmute me. What I was going to say, you didn't understand my lip reading?
No, sorry.
What I was saying is, if you have any follow-ups, feel free. If anyone else wants to jump in, I know Mattia, you also had a question kind of related to recent college grads, so it might be a good time to ask since we're kind of on that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's actually a great segue. My question officially is, how will your ideas for job creation help recent graduates find suitable employment in Massachusetts?
Well, again, Mattia, the training piece for those jobs is very important. One thing I don't think we do a great job of is working with potential employers and having a thorough dialogue as to what their needs are going to be. And there are some examples that you might think are kind of obvious. Computer science. We have just a handful of students around the country, or around the Commonwealth rather, that are taking computer science AP courses. This, by the way, is true around the country, relative to the jobs that we know are going to be available. And of course, in this Commonwealth, it is particularly exacerbated. But there are an awful lot of fields like like trucking, like marine services, welding, nursing, just all over the place. And you can imagine, with all of these job openings, how helpful it would be if people knew of that before they perhaps study things that were going to be much, much more difficult for them to gain the kind of employment they would want. And the last thing in the world you want is someone having a substantial amount of debt and not being in a field that they can repay that and have it essentially pay for itself, relatively quickly. So the combination of those two answers, I think it's very, very important. And again, I'm a huge believer in the vocational school, community college, and the state college universities, because 85% of those graduates are going to stay in state. And that is, I mean, they're the future entrepreneurs. That's where a lot of the growth is going to come from. So we've got to build that system up and make it as strong as possible.
Well, can I follow that up?
Sure.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're talking about having schools working with businesses in Massachusetts to kind of come up with, like you were talking about before, a sponsorship type program. Do you think that the model that Northeastern is famous for with their co-op program, would that be a kind of first step model that you're talking about, or are you describing something that's slightly different than that?
Well, I'm describing something that is slightly different than that, but I am, again, a big, big fan of hands-on education, really for a couple reasons. One, again, you do hit the ground running. The other one is there are a lot of fields that seem different than they really are in practice. I have to tell you, I studied molecular genetics for my first year and a half in grad school, thinking that's where my life was going to go. And to be candid, I found that didn't fulfill all of what I knew my needs were as an individual. I tend to be, a team player, very collaborative, always, working together, and maybe that's just someone who played a lot of sports, and I felt pretty isolated, at least doing the research that I was doing. That was a really good thing to discover when I was 22 and 23 years old, and I'm glad I didn't discover it after I got a PhD, and I was 31, and I had a mountain of debt. So any kind of experiential education, I think, again, is a very good thing. And I will tell you, of the kinds of schools I mentioned, the vocational schools do a pretty remarkable job of having their students understand what that field and what that business, if you will, is really about. But a lot of disciplines don't. So I think you're right. I think that's where the world should continue to go.
Okay, Jeff, I'm going to interject here for a second because we're getting some questions in from social, and I want to just make sure that we address the people that are also just listening to this live stream. So this is just shifting gears a little, but I think it's an interesting one. What are your thoughts on Bitcoins, and do they have a future here in Massachusetts? This one just came through on Facebook.
Well, that is one out of right field a little bit. First of all, what we're talking about, Bitcoin, is obviously very small relative to the economic activity that occurs on a daily basis. I am generally a big fan of anything cutting edge, especially things that facilitate commerce. And the world is a changing place, and we have to sometimes get out of our comfort zone. I know there are some within the establishment that really want to control as much as they can control. If you think about a kind of a parallel to my campaign, there's no question an independent like me who thinks like me could be a perceived threat to either party. And it's not like I'm trying to displace the party. I'm just trying to bring a very different perspective to the corner office to become more efficient. And Bitcoin's in perhaps a similar way could be a way for it's going to be mostly obviously for people in the technology space that really that understand where the world might go. I think it's something that could have real legs. I don't think it's going to displace the the financial system anytime soon. So Let's see where it goes. Let's allow it to thrive. Let's see if it does help commerce in one way, shape, or form. Why not? I don't see a huge risk.
Thank you. So I think it's a good time to shift gears a little bit, and I think you touched a little bit on it, how you're trying to bring a different spin to the corner office. And Lenita, Lenita Foley, thanks for joining us. I know you had some questions just around what Jeff would bring in general to the office and his role as an independent candidate. So Lenita, ask away.
Sure. Hi. I'm a college admissions expert and a founder of a small business called Where Success Blooms, and I try to help families and students understand what differentiates different educational institutions. So likewise, I'd like to ask you, what differentiates you from the other candidates who have already thrown their hats in the ring?
That's a very good question, Lenita. That happens to be my mother's name.
Seriously?
No, you probably don't know too many either.
I don't.
I think there are a number of things that significantly differentiate me. My entire working career has been financing entrepreneurs, and I started my company 21 years ago. So I'm an entrepreneur who finances entrepreneurs, and I work building small. If we really want job growth in this Commonwealth, it will be about building small businesses. That is how you grow. That is where the vast majority of growth comes from. That is where the vast majority of companies are. So that alone, I have lived that one. I am never going to tell my wife, gee, I know what childbirth is like. She's been through it. I have not. I was I was there. But can I really relate to it? I mean, people who think, oh, yeah, I can relate to being an entrepreneur and I know how to grow jobs. When you've been doing it for 2.5 decades, you get it. You understand the pain. And believe me, there is pain, and anyone who's an entrepreneur knows that. I know how to get out of my comfort zone. And that's something, again, that people in government tend not to do. People like to be in their comfort zone. They like the routine. That is not a good thing when there are a number of issues that need to be fixed. We have to go in different directions. We have to do it in education, as we talked about earlier. We have to do it in healthcare. We have to do it in energy. I mean, just go on and on. That's what.
Jeff, sorry, just 1 second. I think we're just getting some feedback. Lenita, could you try muting your mic for a sec? I don't know if it's coming from you, but we'll do process of elimination. If you just mute your mic for a sec. There we go. Yeah, I think that was, yeah, you can keep going, Jeff. And then Lenita, when you want to talk, just unmute again. Sorry about that.
No, thanks for picking that up. So, I think, again, that is a significant differentiator. To be able to establish solutions, I work with technology, and I'm used to doing that, and that's how you can establish a lot of processes and systems that would have, frankly, avoided a lot of the issues we've had in the last couple of years in the state. I also would like to bring an entirely different culture to Beacon Hill, and that I think also is important. A culture with a lot of accountability, a culture with transparency, a culture with a sense of urgency, a culture that people go to work and they say, how do I help small businesses grow? As opposed to, gee, there's no box for that one. And that's something, again, that the other candidates, most of them are products of bureaucracies. And that's okay. We need people in these large organizations to do what they do. But when you have to fix problems, when you have to change, you need someone who is kind of genetically predisposed to change, because that's essentially what our companies do. That's what the technology people on the phone do. They take things to different levels, things that are out of the box. They see things differently. And they get people to believe in solutions that, as I said, are just a bit out of their comfort zone. And I think we desperately need that right now in this place at this time in the Commonwealth. It's a great question.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lenita. We're gonna go to one more from social. This is a two-part question, Jeff. So the first is, and this one came from Twitter. People know that you're an entrepreneur, but somebody wants to know what is your background, and do you get the issues related to regular hardworking people in Massachusetts, and more specifically, how are you going to help people stay afloat with all the rising costs and taxes going on in Massachusetts? So it's a kind of a more about you, and what are you going to do about regular hardworking people and taxes?
Well, certainly I get it as an entrepreneur, having been one of those crazy types that had 12 credit cards and shifted payroll from one to the other way back then. Fortunately, I am out of that phase of being an entrepreneur. But really, I think this question speaks more to where am I really from, and that is, growing up in a lower middle class, very blue collar environment. I'm the product of public education. Fortunately, I had teachers who took an interest in me and coaches who took an interest in me, and that really helped me become who I can be in life. So I get it. When I moved to Boston with $800 or so in my pocket, that was it. I had to sleep on someone's couch for a while and work a very low-paying job just to get enough money to join with a friend and get my first apartment. So that's my background. So I think I certainly understand it from that perspective. I do believe that there are many ways that we need to look at, and we'll put taxes aside for a second, just the fees on small business. And the non-fees, but the bureaucracy and people, again, kind of getting in the way because they're not trying to facilitate the growth of business. They're trying not to make mistakes. As we say in sports, just always sitting back on your heels and playing defense. You've got to proactively be trying to help people all the time. And that is where the job growth is going to come. Over time, I would love to find enough, whether it's redundancy, inefficiency, or have enough growth within the Commonwealth that we can also just bring down the tax rate, because then you get a positive reinforcement of companies making more money, of individuals having more discretionary capital. And again, that's a large driver of growth. So I do think, with some amount of time, you could do both. The first thing you need to do, of course, is to, reduce or eliminate any of the, waste, fraud, abuse. I mean, that goes without saying. But we also have to start driving efficiency in government. I think we're going to see tremendous rewards by doing that.
Thank you. Now to confuse things a little, we have somebody named Jeff here to ask a question. Jeff Way, and Jeff, you can introduce yourself, but I know that you are like me, running a startup, and you had some questions around that for Jeff. So Jeff, meet Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. We met on your opening campaign party, but can I ask a different question, Tammy? Since Jeff mentioned about the fraud, waste, and abuse and accountability on the Capitol.
Absolutely.
Hi, Jeff. My former life, I am the former director of risk management for the whole Department of Defense, so I understand the political realm that you're going to go against about the change and the change of culture. Myself, I was a very young director, and being a young director, I wanted to change the world for a better place, to go in there to stop the fraud, to stop a lot of the waste that was going on. And as a director, I implemented change in 17 months that took my budget, and I actually started making money in the government, for the government, to where we cut our cost $44.5 million in 17 months. And I ended up getting a lot of trouble for that because we didn't use our budget correctly. So how do you take that culture and take that change to Beacon Hill with the people that know nothing about accountability of budgeting, because what I call they budget in the clouds, because nothing's accountable. Unlike a small business, when you go to the ventures, you have to have accountability for every penny that you spend and that you do.
Yeah,
Jeff, we lost your video. Oh, you're back. Go ahead.
Jeff, that's a very good question. That is not just an issue within government. You sometimes see that with large companies, and I'm not going to name them, but I've certainly have dealt with them, that when they get a budget, they kind of have to use it, because if they don't, by the way, they get their budget cut the next year, which is unfortunate, because people should be driven toward efficiency as much as possible. As you know, it's a little more difficult to do that in government than you might do that in the private sector, because in the private sector, you can heavily compensate people for what you did for the government. And by the way, as a taxpayer, thank you very much for what you did. I appreciate that. Whatever you made, you probably deserved a raise with that kind of payback. There are ways, though, of recognizing people for their just outstanding efforts and contribution, and that goes a long way. And one thing that I do stylistically, whenever we have success in what I have done, I've made sure that the people really responsible for that success are recognized in any way I can do that. And government, unfortunately, when there's any level of success, everyone takes ownership of it. And of course, when there's any failure, everyone becomes Teflon, right? And I don't think that's the right management style. I think as a governor, you've got to say, we're going to do something, I'm going to try it, it's on my shift, and if it fails, it's my problem. But then as things are successful, Jeff, you've got to get the credit for it. I mean, you really need, and whether it's in the form of a promotion or recognition, that goes a long, long way, because a lot of people in government are like you. They're trying to do the right thing, and that's something, again, I just don't hear enough of. People being singled out for that kind of extraordinary performance. And then think about, especially with the kind of savings that you were able to garner, think about what that would mean for early childhood education, for example. It could be a totally different area. And there are ways that it can be done. Again, it can't be done to the extent I would like to do it, because of just some of the way the structures work within bureaucracies. But I think you bring up a very, very good point, that wouldn't it be interesting if the motivations were thoroughly aligned. And part of that speaks to that cultural change that I talked to earlier. There needs to be more alignment, and not just, gee, we got the bureaucracy, let's just not mess it up, because the goal for many of these areas should be to actually shrink their size, because they've been able to shrink the need for those kinds of services.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, guys. Before we jump on to a few more panelists, we had a couple more questions come in here. So Jeff, you're sitting in Work Bar in Central Square in Cambridge with a lot of tech startups and the hub of technology, but there's a lot of people tuning in from all over the state, including Western Mass. So someone asks, what separates you from other politicians, Boston politicians, and in terms of what your economic plans for Western Mass are, and whether or not they get paid enough attention in this Commonwealth?
Well, there's no question there's a need for transformational redevelopment throughout the Commonwealth. There are a number of cities which, many call the gateway cities, 26 cities, mostly the non-Boston MSA, again, throughout the Commonwealth. And if you think of the Commonwealth as, in fact, different regions, which is how I like to think of it. I don't like to think of a particular city or township. You like to think of things as potential growth engines. There's no doubt that we have cities that could use some help, and sometimes, again, it's not just a matter of capital. It's a matter of someone thoughtfully looking at regulations on the books and saying, I know the intention of this regulation, and it was designed to, quote, be fair to everyone. But in fact, what it's doing is it's inhibiting a city from getting itself to the next level. I was in Springfield, Mass, and there's an amazing, iconic building that really is just crying to be redeveloped, and they could have retail on the bottom floor and residential on the upper floors. But unfortunately, it's too large for some of the state programs, and yet it will never happen unless we make this really cool, iconic building. We allow it to get the same kind of incentives for a developer, because otherwise they could never make the numbers work. So when you have local developers looking to put the capital in, needing sort of a break in those kinds of regulations, why not do something that makes an entire neighborhood, just changes the conversation in that neighborhood? And it's that kind of thoughtful approach. I'm also a huge fan of working much more closely with city councils and mayors, people who are there. We often have these regulations, again, believing they're fair, that don't really think through perhaps some of the unintended consequences, or were appropriate in a different time, but the time has changed. And there are just tremendous assets throughout this Commonwealth, intellectual assets, hardworking people waiting to get at it. And we just need to, we need to help them get there. And we need to listen to the communities. Just my personal philosophy of life is that, all of you are going to make a better decision about your life than I am, just as an individual, than your city will. But your city's going to make a better decision than the state will. The state will do a better job than the federal government will. Get the decisions at the grassroots level and really understand the needs of communities, because there's extraordinary potential throughout this entire Commonwealth. And I'm very sensitive to the question because, I can understand, especially with so much of the transportation dollars having been essentially, shunted from the rest of the Commonwealth because of the big date. I get it. And that's just kind of one example of where people rightfully feel like they've been left behind.
Thanks for that. So this is kind of a good segue, I think, for this one. I wanted to bring David Fruit on. David, if you want to unmute your mic. David, I know you had a question about Massachusetts' role with energy, but you just have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Hey, Jeff. As Tammy said, my name's David. I graduated from college about 2 years ago. Now I run a software and data analytics consulting company at WorkBar, and we'll be going back to school to get an MBA from Harvard Business School next year. And so, as somebody who worked in energy, I sort of noticed your focus on energy-related issues and the high cost of energy in Massachusetts. And I just was wondering if you could specifically address anything that you think drives high energy prices, and what exactly can be done to try to reduce that.
Yeah, well, energy is sometimes overlooked as a very serious issue in this Commonwealth. We are, depending on who you read, 46th highest energy costs. That's not where you want to lead. And I have we've built the largest biodiesel company in North America, starting with a facility in Quincy. So, and this is starting in the mid-90s. So I get it. I am a fan of alternative energy in a big way. However, you need to be very thoughtful about how that fits into the larger picture. If you think about what has gone on in this country, we have practically sort of airlifted Qatar, which is super rich in natural gas, and plunked it into the middle of the United States. So natural gas is going to be here for the next couple hundred years, according to most estimates. And we've got to figure out a way as a Commonwealth to try and take advantage of that. And you can use natural gas to get rid of some of the heavier, whether it's polluting or the worse carbon footprints, fossil fuels. And we have a company doing that, saving customers typically around 30%. Well, you start saving that for a commercial or industrial company or a college or a university or a hospital system. That is real money. Now, your business now, David, is not terribly energy intensive, but imagine you have a manufacturing company that all of a sudden that bill dramatically decreases, and it makes you able to hire additional people. It makes you more competitive not only nationally, but internationally. There are businesses, high energy intensive businesses, manufacturing, that we can bring back to the Commonwealth. Especially businesses that the manufacturing companies abroad tend to sell a lot into the United States. Well, let's do that here, and let's take advantage of the cost of energy. And there is a way to balance the alternatives and conventional energy sources that are very clean, have tremendous carbon footprints, and that's when you think of healthcare, decreasing costs there, very important. Energy, decreasing that cost. Education, having people ready to take companies to the next level. The people factor being huge in almost any kind of business. That's a tremendous recipe for success. But we have to make it happen. And it's all, for some people, a little bit out of our comfort zone, or their comfort zone.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm just actually being passed another question that just came through social, so we're very multimedia here. So this one just came through. Would love to know where Jeff stands on marijuana. Dispensaries open in Boston, or legalization entirely, taxes around this, just your general thoughts on marijuana.
The general thought is that there's 20 of the 35 initial licenses have been let. There's more approvals going on as we speak with those 20 more vetting. But generally speaking, I'd like to see where the medical marijuana goes, how that develops. As we know, marijuana, in general, in certain quantities, has been largely decriminalized. And from there, I'd like to take the lead of observe Washington and Colorado and see if there are significant unintended consequences. I will say that I would like to understand better, I think we all would, whether we see a growing relationship between that use and things like opiates, which are clearly, I don't know if they'd technically be an epidemic, but that is a grave concern to me, especially when you hear the governor of Vermont give a 35-minute State of the State address, largely addressing heroin use. That is a big deal. So let's kind of walk with this one before we run.
Thanks. And Carrie, you've been so patient sitting over there to the left side of the screen. So Carrie, I wanted to give you a chance in this last part of this to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Great, thank you. I am actually a supporter in two ways. Not only am I a mother of four, I am also a small business owner. And Jeff, you have definitely touched on why I would absolutely support you as a small business owner. So I wanted to ask you a question about why run as an independent and not align yourself with an actual party?
That's a complex question, and part of it is because when you come up through the parties, you become beholden to those parties. It's kind of a fact of life, you know. And you thereafter will spend an awful lot of time raising money for your parties and helping this candidate or that candidate, which is more than just a distraction from your day job. But the other thing as an independent, when you're elected as an independent, and I think Angus King put it remarkably well. He had me down for dinner. For those people who don't know, he's a two-time governor of Maine, elected as an independent businessman. He said, well, first of all, you don't have those special interests tying you down. He said, you know, one little tie doesn't seem like a lot, another one, and then another one. He said, the next thing you know, you feel like Gulliver tied down by the Lilliputians. But he really emphasized it's actually easier to govern as an independent if you're trying to do anything innovative or out of the box or solve problems, because people don't look at you as a threat. If you're from the other party, you know, they don't want to give, you know, the other party, their governor, any credit, so they tend to get in the way, sometimes for reasons we all find curious or don't understand. Of course, what we're seeing in Washington is a really unfortunate, exacerbated example of that statement. But you also, you know, even within parties, you know, there's allegiances and factions and fiefdoms, but to have someone say, listen, I have one goal here. I want to represent everyone of the Commonwealth as best I can. I'm one man. I'm human. I will make mistakes. I've made them in the past. But to know that they're constantly trying to do that, and that they're not, you know, I'm not worried about re-election. That will just not cross my mind. That is not what this is about for me. This is solely about an opportunity to serve and apply a skill set that I've built up over half my life, and a skill set I know is extremely transferable. And it's the skills a lot of you on this chat have. You know, that I'm older, so mine's perhaps more developed, but you can imagine applying those skills in the public sector and the way some things are done. I mean, the opportunity for efficiency and growth, I just think, is enormous. And I think an independent, without the baggage, really brings something to the table there.
That's excellent. I'm not only do you excite me as far as the opportunity for you to lead, but you also instill hope, which I think it is so necessary for the state of Massachusetts to have. So anything I can do for your campaign, please let me know.
Well, I appreciate that, and as far as I'm concerned, anyone like you or Tammy that is both an entrepreneur and a mother, you deserve a T-shirt with a big S on the chest.
Carrie has me beat. I have one. So, you know, we're coming towards the end of it, and as this is a, you know, social endeavor, I thought we'd end from one that was tweeted to us earlier today, and I think it follows really well from Carrie, from your question, and then Jeff, in answering this question, if you want any parting thoughts, and then we'll kind of close it out, and I'll tell people where they can find this afterwards. So here's the question, and you know you're going to get it as an independent candidate. Do you view yourself as a spoiler?
Oh, well, Boston newspapers aside, which had the spoiler alert front page, I guess I'm a spoiler in that when you win as an independent, there are two candidates that won't, and I guess you spoiled their plans for the future. But I certainly am not doing this just to change a conversation as to spoil anything for one party for the advantage of the other. I view this, again, as an opportunity to get a job done. I want to get a job done and then return to my prior life, if you will. I in no way, shape, or form, am doing this for any other, not about ego. It certainly isn't about money. There's tremendous opportunity cost for me. So this is, I don't anticipate playing a quote spoiler role at all. We're doing this to win, and we're doing this to make a difference.
Well, thank you. So I want to thank everyone that took the time out of their busy days. Everyone on this call, has other things that they could be doing. So to take the time to do this is tremendous, and thank you. And to everyone, we have thousands of people who are just listening to this being streamed right now. But as this was in the middle of the week, at lunchtime, we know some people won't be able to see it, so we're also going to be rebroadcasting this on jmacforgov.org/hangout. That's with a lowercase h, so jmacforgov.org/hangout. And I just want to encourage everyone to keep the tweets and the Facebook messages coming. Jeff, I know you've been working really hard to get all of them answered, and I know that sometimes there's a little bit of a backlog of them, but know that they're coming through, right, Jeff? And we're on it, and we're trying to make sure that everyone gets a response.
Absolutely, and I have to thank people that are getting engaged, that are reaching out to their networks and their friends in every way, shape, and form. This requires time, talent, treasure to really do the job well. It's a tough road, but it's the right road that we're taking. And if I could, at least with what I'm saying, ended up with, I had the good fortune to meet a young woman who headed City Year South Africa. And of all times, I met her the morning we all found out that Nelson Mandela died. And I was very impressed with her work and what she's doing to improve schools and education in South Africa. And I was reminded, having breakfast, that Nelson Mandela said, "It is impossible until it is done." We need to remember that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We thought it might be impossible to get all this technology to work, but now it is done, and we did it. And thank you, everyone, for coming. We're gonna end this now, and we will replay it hopefully later today for anyone who missed it. So, panelists and everyone listening, thank you again. Signing off for this first Hangout. Thank you so much.